Hey, this is Notser, and today's video, we're talking Japanese cruiser and destroyer buffs. Game in the background is myself in the Tier 8 Japanese cruiser, Mogami. I'm using the 155mm variant, which is going to be relevant to the discussion. And this is what I wanted to talk about yesterday, but the VIII changes were so heavy-handed I had to discuss them. But these changes are no less exciting or, discussion-worthy, because they really show that Wargaming has developed the identity that they want for all these different lines. And I think it's great. I really love that Wargaming has differentiated these lines so much that playing one over the other feels like almost a completely different experience with just a couple tweaks. Now, the changes. So, the main battery gun, 203mm of the Japanese cruisers, the same gun that is on the Furutaka, the Alba, the Miyoko, the Mogami 203 variant, Ibuki, Atago, Arpeggio Miyoko, Arpeggio, all the Arpeggio Miyoko variants, and the Arpeggio Takao. All of these ships are going to be receiving a Sigma buff. Their accuracy is going to be increased so it is similar to the Zao, which is already probably the most accurate cruiser tier for tier. It is just legendary in its accuracy. It's so legendary that they attached accuracy as a trait to their legendary module. And as you probably have seen in watching my legendary module video and just other Zao videos in general, she's pretty accurate. So for that trait to be transferred over to the entire Japanese cruiser line, it's super exciting. I can't wait. Now, another topic that they're looking to buff is the Miyoko specifically. Separate from the Sigma change, they're looking to buff the Miyoko's turret traverse. Now, it's not just the Miyoko, it's the Arpeggio Miyokos, it's all the different variants of the Miyoko, but faster turret traverse is definitely welcome for that ship. It is a little sluggish. It's one of the ships that honestly was ignored for the longest time for the faster turret traverse buff. We've received it in the Mogami, we've received it in the Ibuki, we've received it in the Zao, but we never actually received it in the Miyoko, and finally we do. The Ibuki is getting a reload buff. It's going from 15 seconds to 13.7 seconds, a very specific number. So maybe that 13.7 transfers to some sort of rate of fire number that's 10 or, 11, something like that. But it's a welcome buff either way. The Ibuki does feel pretty anemic when you compare it to something like the Zao. The Zao is just way above the Ibuki in effectiveness. Torpedo systems, gun systems, maneuverability, accuracy, everything the Zao is just better. But the Ibuki getting that rate of fire buff, that's fantastic. Really appreciate that. I'm curious to see if that will revitalize any enjoyment I have in the Ibuki. We'll have to wait and see, obviously. Now, the cruisers are getting all these buffs, which is great. Sort of a global buff to the 203 Japanese cruisers. Never going to complain about that. But they are not the only Japanese line that is receiving a significant change to playstyle. Wargaming is interested in improving the Alpha Strike potential of the Japanese destroyer line. Now, this does not apply to the 100mm terrors that have been just running rampant over the game the last couple of patches. This is more towards your typical Japanese destroyers. Your Hatsuharu, Fubuki, Shiratsuyu, Akatsuki, Kagero, Yugumo, Shimakaze, Shinonome, Asashio, Asashio B, High School Fleet Hirakaze. All of these ships are receiving an Alpha Strike buff to their high explosive shell. These are the 127mm slow reload Japanese destroyers that you're familiar with. So their HE shell is going from a maximum damage output if you Citadel. The shell is going from a maximum damage of 1800 to a maximum damage of 2150. And the fire chance is getting increased from 7% base to 9% base. So just a lovely buff to the Japanese destroyer line. It is interesting that they chose to do this, because Wargaming themselves said long ago that the Japanese destroyer line represented the pinnacle of the torpedo-focused DDs. and they would only go away from it. Well, they have certainly gone away from it. They have moved way further towards a gun build, and pretty much every single line past the Japanese, their guns are pretty good. They're definitely usable in a brawling 1v1 enemy DD on enemy DD, but the Japanese just don't really feel that good. So a lot of the population refuses to even fire the guns. You can't afford to do that. You can't afford to do it now, but you definitely can't afford to play like that if they implement this change, because the Alpha Strike is a really significant increase. I was doing the math on my Shimakaze. Shimakaze has 6 127mm guns. My average damage per salvo, assuming that the high explosive, all 6 high explosive shells hit the target, they don't shatter, and it's the 1800 variant, it does about 3,000 damage. Because high explosive only does 30% of its damage, unless of course it's citadels, which obviously it can't. But 30% of its damage, 3,000 for a full 6 127mm gun salvo, not bad. It gets up to 4,200 after these changes. That's a very significant change. Just tweaking the numbers just slightly, it pushes it way above the ability to ignore it. People, for whatever reason now, they will ignore firing their guns in their Japanese DDs. I just want to tear my hair out because they're passing up such easy finishing potential. So many times, and you've probably seen this too, you'll see that Japanese DD and he'll refuse to fire his guns at a clearly, easily finished off target. I mean, it has to be the easiest target to finish off in the history of mankind. And yet they refuse. And instead they send their torpedoes, and you have to wait the 20, 30, 40 seconds for that torpedo to make its way over to the target. And by the time it gets there, one of the friendlies is able to take the kill from across the map. Because that Japanese DD refused to fire his guns. You can't play like that any longer. That has to be gone. It should already be gone, but it really needs to be gone when they implement this change. And this change is going to be very interesting. Everyone else is going to be envious of the Japanese DDs because they're going to bring the highest potential alpha strike per salvo. Their damage output, over time is not going to be impressive, but that per salvo charge weight is really impressive. 4,200. It's going to be very intimidating to deal with, and I can't wait. I can't wait for these changes. Cruisers, destroyers, the Japanese deserve this. I think their battleship line is pretty good. I think some of the battleships could stand to get a little better. I mean, it's very close. It's very well designed. I think the game itself is moving into a much more clear trait that is existing across the lines. I think it's just so good wargaming. This is exactly what we need in the game. Just more class identification across the line itself. Ones that make sense, ones that are fun to play with and play around. I think it's great. I don't have any problems with any of these changes. And point for point, every single ship that is receiving a change needed that change. Myoko's been pretty anemic for a while, and one of the reasons why is that turret traverse, better accuracy, the better rate of fire for the Ibuki, which I don't even know is a pretty rare ship. Most people don't pull their tier 9 Ibuki. They would probably prefer their tier 10 Zao, because the Zao is a beast compared to the Ibuki. And then of course the Japanese DD. So I'm just, as a Japanese fan and as someone who has played this game for a really long time and loved the cruisers and the DDs, I'm psyched. I want it. I can't wait to have my time with these changes. I don't know exactly when they'll be implemented. It was a developer blog post about 3 days ago. I would expect that we would see some of these changes either tested on the public test server for 7.11, or it would make the live version of 7.12. I don't know exactly how fast they want to get these out, but, looking at these changes, I don't see anything wrong with it. It's all very fair, and I think it's welcomed. I did feel like my Japanese DDs gave up too much guns compared to everything else. I mean, they just introduced British, and the British guns are just ridiculous compared to the Japanese DDs. So it's definitely fixing a power creep. And it's welcome. I like that Wargaming is being more active in their protection of the meta and the gameplay and the balance. I feel like that's the way to approach this, and I really am super excited for all this. I'm a fan of the Japanese ships. I've loved their high explosive. I've always loved every aspect of them, and I just felt like they deserved more, and I think that they're getting more, and I'm really thrilled. I can't wait to play these versions. Tell me what you think. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you next time.